My favourite Spider-Man film moment is shockingly not any of the iconic ones, but a simple moment from Amazing 2, where Peter Parker has to distract a bunch of Oscorp security guards to help Gwen escape. It's a goofy moment that really makes no sense upon any close inspection, like how did he undo and redo the dude's shoelaces between cuts?
Alright, on your way, I'm sorry, I'm all thumbs today.
But I love it because without $1 million costume, CGI or a fancy Hollywood score, it fucking nails Peter Parker perfectly. He's a happy-go-lucky trickster. A dude who'd whack Flash to stop him from following him, acts confident in front of women, from Johnny Storm's girlfriend to Betty to Liz Allen, and without his mask, Peter is still Spider-Man. There's no all of a sudden he's a shy, different, impotent man, but his time in his costume has improved him all around. The Amazing films aren't exactly Shakespeare, but Andrew Garfield is my favorite live-action Spider-Man because he captured, truly, Peter Parker's full range of temperaments. What defines Spider-Man? Most people would probably say, oh, responsibility, but that's never been a satisfactory answer for me, because every superhero is responsible. It goes with the premise. Spider-Man just so happened to integrate it into his brand. Therefore, I'd argue what makes Spider-Man distinct is his personality, and how it contextualizes responsible actions. It's important to state, Stan Lee's original Peter Parker is not the Raimi version. He's not a shy kid with a good heart, he's a troubled kid fighting himself, because responsibility isn't natural to him. He's got great potential, but selfish impulses. Therefore, it takes regular work for him to change. There's an extra layer of complexity, you see. As a result, to express my point, I've organized a simple model to understand the 3 most important personality traits that I argue defines Spider-Man and what makes him special. First, Peter Parker is a flirty trickster because his whole journey is centered on his transformation from a no-powered outcast to losing that resentment through finding happiness with himself. He learns to laugh at Flash instead of affected by him, and went from being rejected by girls to rejecting them because he's grown up. Like in issue 13 when Liz dresses up for him, and Peter Parker doesn't care because he's more concerned with Mysterio. Oh no, everything's great, Liz. If it gets any better, I'll shoot myself. Therefore, Peter Parker's cheerfulness and confidence is an important marker for his growth. Secondly, Peter Parker has to have bad luck, or Parker luck, for the reason that right from the get-go, Spider-Man was created as a joke. As Stan Lee said,
"Well, I always thought if Woody Allen were a superhero, he'd be Spider-Man."
So unflattering details, like it randomly raining on Peter Parker, or him spraining his ankle on a rope, taps back into the essence of Stan's personality and implicitly pays respect to his sense of humor and his legacy. Third, and finally, Spider-Man has to have a really bad temper. If Harry slapped real Peter Parker in the face, he'd be bloody pinned against a wall like Ned, and Ned didn't even do anything. Or another example would be when Peter Parker starts a fight with Flash when he's particularly f***ed off in issue 26. "I'd never have believed it. Peter Parker deliberately attacked that group of boys." This quality is like a form of psychological leakage that shows that that bully victim who wanted to bully back is still there, is still growing, and that's what makes this journey of responsibility impactful and meaningful. You can track his change. Collectively, these qualities grounds Peter Parker, so being responsible is what guides him, despite poor fortunes, because responsibility quells his anger and directs his developing charisma towards productive goals, so he doesn't end up like Jonah, Flash, or even his villains. Tobey Maguire scores 1 out of 3, Tom Holland scores 2.5 out of 3, but Andrew Garfield is the only one that scores 3 out of 3.
Come on, how dare you?
How dare I? How dare you?
No, I'm not saying he's a hero.
You can't afford your milk, just step aside.
Eggs.
In Amazing Spider-Man 1, Peter Parker tries to stick up for a kid by calling out Flash.
Put him down! Eugene!
When he gets his powers, he publicly embarrasses him. That's perfect. Uncle Ben isn't a wise sage, he's an old man that scolds Peter Parker for trying to get even.
If so, I guess you must feel pretty good about yourself now, right? Yeah, I thought so.
Yes! We've got it, ladies and gentlemen. Peter Parker isn't a nice boy who just wants the attention of the popular girl, but he's a bully victim who's looking forward to be a bully himself. Therefore, when he became Spider-Man, he doesn't return to his old nice self, but his fundamental desires changes.
Sorry.
although I am a bit miffed at how he lets a criminal go just to get back at someone, just like in the Raimi movies, as opposed to not caring, because the point is, Peter Parker wasn't wronged, he was thinking wrong. The root of the situation doesn't start from a dude being a dick, but Peter Parker himself being a dick. However, it works better here, because A, the whole penny system highlights Peter Parker's entitlement, so he's still a troubled kid, to an extent.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, you're holding up the line. You can leave a penny, you can't take a penny.
B, like in Amazing Fantasy issue 15, Uncle Ben doesn't say, with great power comes great responsibility, it was a non-diegetic box. So they're able to keep Peter Parker's primary struggle not with Ben, but with himself, which leads to C. Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man, not out of guilt, but as he hunts Ben's killer, the joy of following his conscience changes him, from saving a father's son to building an inspirational symbol.
Dude's crazy.
Peter's mask grows to represent something he didn't even know he had. Spider-Man isn't just a burden, but an opportunity for him to grow, so all that potential that was squandered by his pettiness has an outlet. Although Peter Parker revealing his secret identity so willy-nilly is a bit weird, because his very first relationship broke down precisely because he refused. But then again, that was also because Betty actively hated danger, whereas Gwen is into it. Captain Stacy is also great for the reason that he adds in the crime drama dimension finally.
I'm not messing around. Just bring him in. Just call him in.
And the ending is genuinely perfect. Where Raimi's Spider-Man's origin is about a kid honoring his uncle, Webb's is about a kid learning to listen to himself.
Peter Parker, if there's one thing you are, it's good.
It goes back to Stan Lee's original run, where no matter how much the older generation dismiss the young people, they're the ones with the conscience, and they're the ones that would change the world. As Jameson secretly envied Spider-Man for being the man he wished he was, Ben's final speech is with that perspective given a voice.
And if anyone's destined for greatness, it's you, son. You owe the world your gifts. You just have to figure out how to use them. And know that wherever they take you, we'll always be here. You're my hero.
Spider-Man 1 may be a better movie because of the concessions it makes, constructs a more satisfying story. It's very cathartic to see a sweet kid get the attention he deserves, especially when it's from an attractive girl, but that's not Spider-Man. The story about a kid who has the ambitions to be a jerk, learns not to by letting go of his old wants and finding his self-worth, that's fucking him. Amazing Spider-Man 1 is still the best and closest Spider-Man origin film we've ever gotten, and it deserves credit. Amazing Spider-Man 2 is unfortunately less successful. It's so overly stuffed that it constantly never generates enough momentum for anything.
Well, Jameson pays me a fair wage. If it was 1961, he paid me a fair
And the emotions in one scene often interrupts the next. One moment Peter Parker is fighting Electro, and the next he's just bored at home with no reaction with what just happened, for the reason that we've entered another subplot, the one with his parents. The first 7 minutes with the Parkers is really weird, where the first Amazing film self-diluted itself with a mystery that went absolutely nowhere, because you can tell Sony had no plan, they just wanted an additional branding element to justify its reboot. Now it's a main narrative ingredient, and I'm mixed about it. On one hand, making the Parkers so important takes away the ordinariness of Peter Parker himself, but narratively, it also maintains a very strong lock on his psychology. Once again, it's about him listening and learning about himself.
Nothing is as important to me as my son Peter.
But the following opening is genuinely dynamite. Spider-Man's not just witty, he's cocky and full of joy. Peter Parker breaking up with Gwen because the voice of an old man overpowers his own is abstractly consistent with Spider-Man's core themes, I guess, but it's not the most satisfying direction to go, especially since if she's gonna die by the end. Like, save the heartbreak for the end. I'm completely desensitized to seeing Andrew Garfield crying now. However, there is a great theme to the movie. It's about how even though time is always running out for those you love, it's important to live in the moment. Aunt May is worried of Peter Parker's conspiratorial obsession with the dead, because he's not there for her anymore.
I don't know how. And you're dreaming about your perfect father who was never here.
But when he rips it all up, he finally finds the right clue. Peter Parker looks for closure, but only finds it when he starts living again.
We've all got to make a choice. Right? I choose you.
Whereas Harry is looking to extend his life, but that's what makes him a monster.
More time to figure out
Have
something else.
time!
Gwen is destined to die, but she's the one that inspires others to live. Those who fight the inevitable become monsters. Those who live with it becomes greater. And like how Kingpin first appeared in Spider-Man No More when Spider-Man quits, the Sinister Six rises. And once again, Peter Parker reconnects with the memory of someone he loves and listens and comes back. It's important for me to stress that what made Spider-Man groundbreaking was his realistic range of emotions. He had a healthy sense of humor, and he can lose his patience and be a jerk, like all of us in real life. He's relatable not because he's humble, but because he's unflattering. Peter was a vengeful kid in Amazing Fantasy 15. Grew substantially in issue 1, where he's a good kid trying to do his best, but is easily affected by the opinions of others. Then in issue 26, he's so worn out that he starts fights with people, and finally, by issue 50, he reconnects with himself and declares his new confidence to the world. He's a character that's always constantly developing and socially improving. Spider-Man is not about a dude's relationship with a girl, but a boy's relationship with himself. A connection that if you don't form when you're young, it may never come in the future. Amazing Spider-Man 1 is an alright movie, but it gets this. Amazing Spider-Man 2 isn't great, but it still tries its best to keep to this wavelength. And as a result, Andrew Garfield gets to exhibit the full spectrum of who this character is. Therefore, even though I know Tom Holland's voice is technically the most accurate due to the Queen's accent, Andrew has the closest personality. His swagger, fed-upness, and maturity. When I read the comics, I hear him. He's my Spider-Man, and even though he became a sacrificial lamb for the politics of two big corporations, he still sincerely showed us that we have to be greater than what we suffer. And even if we fail, what better ways for there to live?
I'm so confused right now, baby. Didn't work for us, didn't work for us. And I guess it's over now, baby. Didn't work for us, didn't work for us.
Oh no, everything's great, Liz. If it gets any better, I'll shoot myself. Oh, Peter, I always knew you had a great sense of humor.